Good afternoon. The graveyard shift after lunch, although it was good food, so maybe you're feeling energized. I work for the world's largest philanthropy dedicated to children in developing countries, the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. I also have two small boys of my own, one of which had a fever last night and kept me up. So if I trail off, if somebody could throw something at me, that would be helpful. In 2050, they're going to be younger than I am today. In 2050. People talk about this being long-term. It's not even an entire lifetime. In 2050, we're supposed to be a net zero carbon society. That means they will be working in jobs where there are no fossil fuels. This is pretty exciting. It's also pretty challenging. By 2030, by the time they go to university, we're supposed to have ended hunger globally. We're supposed to have provided access to clean water for everyone and universal access to contraception. So how do we get there? 16 million children today, under 5, are wasted. That means they've had so little food that the upper arm circumference is really tiny. Of those 16 million children, only 3 million get treated, 3 million. And we know that there's a sort of a plumpy nut, peanut butter concoction that can save their lives. It's totally proven. We have programs around the world that have 80 to 90% survival rates in those programs. We need to increase the coverage of treatment. We need to halve the cost of it. But ironically, nobody actually knows how to prevent SAM. Nobody has actually taken the time to study prevention of severe acute malnutrition. So we're now getting the community together to look into what are the things that would enable us to prevent severe acute malnutrition before it actually happened. Shocking that we still, in this day and age, don't know how to prevent wasting. Meanwhile, 162 million children are stunted. That means they probably didn't get enough food in the first 1,000 days of their life, or rather the right kind of food, and possibly were born with low birth rate. In addition, 16 million girls between the age of 15 to 19 will get pregnant this year. 1 million of them under 15. Under 15, having a baby under 15. And why is this connected to nutrition? Well, not only does this deprive the girls of their life chances, but the health outcomes of their children are going to be significantly worse. They're much more likely, the children of young mothers, to be born low birth weight. And if they're born low birth weight and stunted, they're much more likely to pass that on to their children too. And so the intergenerational cycle of poverty continues. And meanwhile, the climate crisis, visible to all, is making this more and more and more likely. Children are much more likely to be stunted if they're born in a drought. They're much more likely to be wasted if they suffer from extreme weather events. CIFF works on all these areas, and yet we had been working on these areas for 10 years in a completely siloed way. Just to give you a really embarrassing example, when I took over, I discovered that the nutrition team had been funding Copenhagen Consensus, run by the notorious climate skeptic Bjorn Lomborg, to justify nutrition spending in Bangladesh. How is it possible that an organization that both works on climate change and nutrition is working with an organization that says the Paris Agreement is damaging to economic growth? This is just one example of how siloed our communities are and how it never occurred to one team to work with the other team to solve that problem. For this reason, we're trying to bring a lot of our thinking together. For example, we're funding the Eat Lancet Commission and the Eat Climate Change Chatham House Commission. Lancet's going to give us some science-based targets to guide us towards healthy food systems, and Chatham House is going to translate that into dietary guidelines. This is essential because we really need to think about how we can deliver both healthy systems and sustainable systems. But how do we get from that geek onto the street? And so this is where I think adolescents have a huge, huge role to play. The answer must lie in the largest cohort of adolescents that the world has ever seen. Think of the creativity and the energy of those young people about to be unleashed upon the world. Those young people are also entering sexual debut, and if you could meet their unmet need for contraception, if those girls can stay in school and they can pass on good nutrition to their children, you can break the intergenerational cycle of poverty right there. And how do you do that? There are lots and lots and lots of tools now at our disposal. Let me give you an example of a wonderful organization that we fund called Well Told Story. Well Told Story run a comic in Kenya called Shujaz, which more than half the young people in Kenya read. Shujaz is a DJ who lives in a slum in Nairobi and uses a dialect called Sheng. Now, the young people that read this comic have better outcomes. They're more likely to stay in school, they're more likely to be entrepreneurial, they're less at risk of HIV, and they're less at risk of teenage pregnancy. And they have a huge online platform as well. In fact, this fictional character, the DJ, actually receives millions of messages on Facebook. Now, what this organization has done has taken a supercomputer in Cambridge and taught it to speak Sheng. And this is analyzing the zeitgeist of Kenyan youth in real time, understanding how they feel about sexual violence, how they feel about nutrition, how they feel about their life chances. Imagine if we could actually think about harnessing big data and the appetite of young people for a better life in all the aspects of the work that we're talking about today, whether it's sustainable food. Many of those young people are looking after chickens in order to earn extra money as they go through school. Many of those young people are trying to make choices about whether they have transactional sex in order to afford somewhere to live, or whether they stay in school, and how do they do that. If we could harness this data, if we could harness this energy, we would be able to have a massive shift in generational behavior. But to break down silos, we need to be willing to work across boundaries. We need to stop thinking about climate over here and food over here and nutrition over here. These things are deeply, deeply interconnected. It doesn't mean we won't need sectoral interventions. Of course we will. Of course we will. But we do need a common vision, an authentic movement that can be both urgent and locally relevant, but prescient and globally intelligent. This is only the start to the conversation. But I have huge trust in the young people that they can turn the world around and help deliver the SDGs and the Paris climate goals. Thank you.